Before we drift into tonight's tale of the entire Gunner story, I'd love to know where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up, let's begin. When we think about the vast and mysterious world of Adventure Time, our minds often leap to heroes and villains, to magic crowns and cosmic beings, to kingdoms made of candy and forests full of secrets. But sometimes the truest mysteries are hidden in plain sight. In this story, we follow the quiet waddles of a small penguin who, at first glance, seems like nothing more than comic relief. Yet beneath the surface, Gunter holds layers of meaning, history, and identity that stretch far beyond the icy halls of the Ice King's lonely domain. From the very first time Gunter appeared, bundled within the episodes of the show, there was something unusual about him. The Ice King, with his tangled beard and desperate longing for companionship, treated this penguin as his closest confidant. We see Gunter sweeping the floor of the Ice Palace, clapping stubby wings when praised, or carelessly knocking over objects with no regard for order. These scenes feel light-hearted, almost like background comedy. But as with much in Adventure Time, what seems silly at first slowly unfurls into something profound. It is curious that the Ice King refers to every penguin in his kingdom by the same name. Whether one or many, they are all Gunter. He does not distinguish them, and perhaps he cannot. To him, the penguins blur together into one comforting figure, a symbol of loyalty that never leaves his side. For viewers, this raises a gentle question that floats in the back of the mind. Is there one true Gunter, or are all Gunters equally the same, carrying one identity across many little bodies? If you watch closely, you'll notice that Gunter isn't merely passive. He waddles with a sense of purpose, sometimes mischievous, sometimes strangely independent. He slaps the Ice King when annoyed, steals items when nobody is watching, and even attempts strange experiments of his own. In a show where every detail has hidden meaning, Gunter's actions hint that there is more at play than just a silly penguin filling space in the background. For the Ice King, Gunter is more than a companion. He is an anchor. Surrounded by the loneliness of his icy towers, the king pours his heart into his penguin. He rants about princesses, about schemes, about dreams, and he does so to an audience of one. The way Ice King speaks to Gunter feels almost childlike, as if he knows his thoughts will be met with no judgment. Gunter is a mirror, absorbing the king's sadness and silliness alike. In bedtime reflection, this is not unlike the way a child clings to a stuffed animal, or the way someone whispers secrets to a pet at night. The comfort lies not in whether the listener understands, but in the safety of speaking without fear. Gunter embodies this role fully, standing silently, blinking wide-eyed, as Ice King bears his emotion. But it's not only about the Ice King. What makes Gunter's story so enchanting is that we, as viewers, begin to notice subtle differences in the penguins themselves. One waddles with a limp, another carries a sly expression, and one, perhaps the original, seems to hold a heavier presence than the rest. The fact that all of these penguins bear the same name becomes stranger the longer you think about it. Why would the Ice King choose to collapse their identities into one? Is it laziness? Or is it a desperate attempt to craft consistency in a world that feels unstable? Each Gunter, whether background extra or focal point of an episode, contributes to this larger idea. Identity in Adventure Time is not always fixed. Sometimes it bends, sometimes it repeats, and sometimes it hides truths we cannot yet see. When we pull the camera back, we see that Gunter is a paradox. He is at once an ordinary penguin, performing menial chores and a figure brimming with strangeness, forever caught in the odd gravity of Ice King's world. In the stillness of bedtime storytelling, this duality feels important to rest on. Because if Adventure Time teaches us anything, it is that even the smallest creatures can carry the largest mystery. Gunter's first impressions are playful, even absurd, but as we rest with the character, we realize how deliberately he has been placed. A penguin, of all things, to share the frozen throne room with a cursed king. Why a penguin? Why not a wolf, a raven, or a mystical beast? Perhaps it is because penguins themselves are paradoxes, birds that do not fly, creatures built for companionship, huddling together in storms, animals that waddle with clumsy humor, yet endure some of the harshest environments in the natural world. In many ways, Gunter mirrors Ice King perfectly, ridiculous on the surface, enduring immense hardship underneath. And so, as we tuck into this first segment of Gunter's story, we see him in all his many faces. The servant sweeping floors, the mischievous thief stealing baubles, the loyal friend listening in silence, and the countless duplicates, all answering to the same name, as though identity itself is only a costume to be worn and exchanged. What lies beneath these faces is something we will uncover as we move deeper into tonight's story. But for now, in this quiet beginning, it is enough to rest with the mystery of Gunter's many roles, drifting gently into the thought that perhaps no one in the land of Oo is ever just what they seem. When we linger on the Ice King's icy halls, there is always the sound of Gunter's little feet echoing softly on the frozen floor. That steady waddle, the gentle squeak of a flipper brushing against a glass bottle, the faint sound of a sleepy squawk, these are the rhythms that make his presence feel eternal. Even when the Ice King's rambling stories stretch on into nonsense, Gunter remains, blinking with wide eyes, tilting his head just enough to remind us that someone is always listening. The humor of Gunter comes from his small size, but the heart of Gunter comes from his consistency. He is always there when other friends have long gone. Even the penguin's stubborn refusal to play by the rules adds to this sense of familiarity. We never quite know whether Gunter will obey or rebel, but we know he will always remain in the scene. And in a world as fragile and shifting as Oo, that constant presence carries more meaning than it appears. It is here that we start to notice something unusual. For all of Ice King's schemes and obsessions, he rarely holds on to people. Princesses slip away. Adventurers chase him off, even Finn and Jake, though often entangled in his life, come and go like the tide. But Gunter stays. Whether scolded, hugged, ignored, or praised, Gunter does not leave the Ice King. This is no small detail. It suggests that beneath the silliness, Gunter may serve as the emotional foundation for Ice King's entire existence. Imagine for a moment a castle of ice, silent and cold, filled with treasures and trinkets, stolen in lonely fits of obsession. In the heart of that castle, a king who remembers nothing of his true self and who fears silence more than anything. What makes this frozen palace a home, if not the presence of Gunter? The penguin's waddles, the flutter of flippers, the squawk that breaks the emptiness, they are the heartbeat of the Ice Kingdom itself. And yet this heartbeat is not so simple, because Gunter, as familiar as he feels, is not bound to one body alone. Across the series, we see multiple penguins, all carrying the name, all answering to Ice King's voice. Sometimes several appear in the same frame. Sometimes one penguin seems to vanish only to return again with slightly different quirks. It is as if Gunter exists less as an individual and more as a role, a title worn by many. This repetition creates an almost dreamlike quality. Think of how in dreams, faces shift and blur, but you know them by feeling rather than by name. So too is Gunter. Whether there are 10 penguins or one, they feel the same. Ice King treats them as one, and so, perhaps, they become one. A flock of reflections collapsed into a single identity. What might this say about Ice King's mind? In his fractured memory, he clings to sameness. The world is too unpredictable, too cruel, and so he anchors himself in repetition. If every penguin is Gunter, then Gunter can never leave him. If every penguin is Gunter, then Ice King is never alone. It is a coping mechanism, a gentle but haunting reminder that names hold power, and repetition can create the illusion of permanence. From the outside, this can feel almost unsettling. Why should identity be so easily blurred? Why do these penguins not claim their own name? But Adventure Time thrives in this uncertainty. The show invites us to ask questions without always providing neat answers. And as bedtime listeners, we rest within the mystery rather than rush to solve it. In these early impressions, Gunter's role is twofold. On the surface, he is comic relief waddling across the screen, breaking the tension with a squawk or an accident. But beneath the surface, he is the quiet core of Ice King's fragile world. He is the companion that never strays, the listener that never interrupts, the friend that does not demand explanation. And here lies the beauty of Gunter's many faces. He is both ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary because he is just a penguin, repeating simple motions and making silly noises. Extraordinary because this ordinariness becomes profound in the world of Ooh. He grounds the chaos. He shapes the silent. He makes the Ice Kingdom more than a lonely castle. As we continue to wander through his story, it becomes clear that these many Gunters are not just duplicates. They are the first clue that something much larger and stranger lives beneath the surface. To understand Gunter is to accept that identity in Ooh is slippery, that the smallest of creatures might carry secrets deeper than mountains of ice. For now, in this part of the tale, we remain with the image of a penguin waddling through frozen hall. Simple, stubborn, silly, and yet impossibly important. The Ice King may think of Gunter as a servant, as a pet, as a nuisance, but to us, he is already more. As the story of Gunter drifts further, we notice how often he seems to slip between roles without hesitation. One moment he is tender, curling up against the Ice King like a faithful companion. The next, he is mischievous, knocking over bottles or pushing buttons he should not touch. And sometimes he reveals flashes of something altogether different and intelligent, sharper than expected, an awareness that lingers in his gaze longer than a simple penguin should allow. This is why the many Gunters fascinate viewers so deeply. If there are dozens, even hundreds of penguins in the Ice Kingdom, why does one in particular stand out? The answer seems to shift with each appearance. Sometimes it is the Gunter that resists commands, striking the Ice King with a flipper in defiance. Sometimes it is the Gunter who sneaks off on secret errands, acquiring objects no ordinary penguin could imagine stealing. And sometimes it is the one who simply stares a little too long at the crown, as though remembering something long forgotten. The uncertainty here is not a flaw, but a feature. Adventure Time often blurs the line between what is background detail and what is cosmic truth. By naming every penguin Gunter, the show plants a seed of confusion that slowly grows into intrigue. It is bedtime mystery woven into comedy, making us laugh, then pause, then wonder. Consider the way Ice King speaks to Gunter. Rarely does he pause to distinguish whether he's addressing one penguin or many. He pours out his schemes and secrets as though talking to a singular presence, a singular confidant. His words flow with desperation and trust, because he knows Gunter will not abandon him. Even when his penguin waddles away mid-conversation, Ice King continues as though nothing has changed. For him, Gunter is constant, and constancy is more precious than truth. In the gentle silence of bedtime, we might imagine what this means for the Ice King's fractured mind. Once he was Seaman Petrikov, a man with love in his heart and brilliance in his mind. But when the crown took him, it shattered his reality into fragments. Perhaps the naming of every penguin Gunter is a way of stitching those fragments together, a way of saying, if everything else is chaos, at least this one thing remains the same. Yet the longer we watch, the more we notice Gunter's peculiar independence. He does not always follow orders. He does not always linger at Ice King's side. Sometimes he acts on his own desires, claiming treasure, sneaking into strange places, or displaying temper in surprising bursts. These moments suggest that Gunter is not merely a reflection of Ice King's needs, but a being with his own hidden layers. In fact, it is often through humor that these mysteries emerge. The show delights in presenting Gunter as ridiculous waddling with an object far too large for his small body, or squeaking in moments of tension. But behind the laughter, there is a recurring sense of unpredictability. Why does Gunter do the things he does? Why is he both obedient and rebellious, loyal and selfish, ordinary and extraordinary? This paradox is what makes him more than just a background character. He feels like a dream slipping through your fingers, familiar, yet constantly changing shape. And the presence of multiple Gunters only deepens the dreamlike quality. It is as though identity itself is unstable in the land of Oo, shifting like ice melting and refreezing. We also cannot ignore the visual language of the show. In the midst of Ice King's cluttered castle, where treasures and cages and oddities fill every corner, the penguins add another layer of surreal clutter. They waddle in groups, overlapping one another, each identical yet carrying some subtle quirk. A tilt of the head here, a sharper squawk there. And among them, one true Gunter always emerges, the one who seems just a little stranger, a little more central. In quiet reflection, we might see this as a metaphor for how people cling to familiarity in uncertain times. We give one name to many faces, not because they are the same, but because we need them to be. Ice King's need for Gunter is stronger than his need to distinguish between individuals. He chooses sameness as comfort, and so the world bends his perception. But even as we rest in this gentle interpretation, the story teases something larger. There are hints, soft, fleeting, but undeniable, that Gunter's identity is not bound by Ice King's need for constancy. Instead, Gunter may carry his own hidden truth, something vast and ancient, buried beneath feathers and flippers. The little penguin, waddling across the icy floor, may not simply be the king's pet. He may be something that predates kingdom, crown, and even the frozen mountains themselves. In this early part of the tale, however, we do not yet dive into that cosmic revelation. Here we remain with the ordinary strangeness. The many Gunters, all named the same, all blurring into one. The Ice King, clinging to his penguin like a lifeline, and viewers caught between laughter and curiosity, wondering why a simple penguin feels so important. The many faces of Gunter remind us that identity can be slippery. Sometimes it is shaped by the names others give us. Sometimes it is shaped by our actions, even the small and silly ones. And sometimes identity hides beneath masks, waiting for the right moment to emerge. For now, though, the scene remains quiet. A penguin waddles across the frost. A king mutters to himself, and in the stillness of the Ice Kingdom, the many faces of Gunter shimmer like reflections on frozen glass, each one the same, each one different, each one carrying secrets we have only begun to uncover. As we linger a little longer on this opening chapter of Gunter's tale, it is worth reflecting on what makes his presence so strangely magnetic. He is not a warrior like Finn, not a ruler like Princess Bubblegum, not a cosmic entity like the Lich. He is, at first glance, a small penguin with stubby wings and a squeaky voice. Yet he endures. He is there across countless episodes, quietly woven into the fabric of Oo, until the thought of the Ice Kingdom without him feels incomplete. The secret lies in the way Gunter embodies contradiction. He is silent, but he speaks volumes. He is ordinary, but he feels essential. He is one, yet he is many. In storytelling, such contradictions often point to deeper mystery, and Adventure Time thrives on it. It is why we can spend hours unraveling the tale of a penguin who, in another show, might have been nothing more than background decoration. Consider how the Ice King leans on Gunter as though the penguin were an extension of himself. When he feels lonely, Gunter is there. When he feels angry, Gunter takes the brunt of his frustration. When he feels proud, he parades Gunter about as though showing off a treasure. Gunter fills the void that the crown carved into Simon's mind, a role that no princess, no adventurer, and no treasure could ever fill. But the relationship is not one-sided. For all of Ice King's reliance, Gunter does not always bend to his will. We see moments where the penguin resists, bites back, even lashes out with surprising force. These flashes of rebellion are more than comedic interruptions. They are reminders that Gunter has an identity beyond servitude. Even in the simplest of creatures, Adventure Time whispers, there is a spark of independence. And then there are the times when Gunter's behavior seems almost prophetic. The way he stares at the crown with unsettling fixation. The way he gathers objects as though remembering their importance. The way his gaze lingers just a moment, too long, filled with something we cannot name. It is in these moments that the bedtime story takes a more mysterious turn. For though this segment is focused on the many faces of Gunter, we are beginning to sense that one of those faces is far older and far more powerful than anyone could have imagined. For the moment, however, we keep our lantern light on the ordinary, the repetition of the name Gunter, the overlapping flock of penguins, identical yet somehow distinct, the laughter they inspire, and the unease that sometimes follows. Each one is a mask, a reflection, a fragment of a truth not yet fully revealed. If we think of Gunter in the language of dreams, he becomes even clearer. In dreams, familiar figures return again and again, sometimes shifting shape, but never losing their essence. Gunter is like that. He is the recurring dream of the Ice King's fractured mind, always present, always comforting, always just beyond full understanding. When we turn our gaze back to the frosty halls of the Ice King, it is impossible not to notice how closely Gunter and the Ice King orbit one another. Their bond may look comedic on the surface, like a bumbling wizard and his mischievous pet, yet if we rest with it long enough, a deeper truth begins to glow through the cracks. Gunter, in his silence, becomes more than a companion. He becomes a reflection. Think of how the Ice King spends his days. He stumbles through half-formed plans to kidnap princesses, scribbles notes to himself in a shaky scrawl, and hums songs to an empty room. His mind, fractured by the power of the crown, reaches constantly for someone to notice him, to validate his existence. And in this longing, he turns most often to Gunter. The penguin listens without complaint, standing still while the king pours his emotions into the air. There is a softness to this ritual. The Ice King rants about his dreams of ruling, his frustrations with Finn and Jake, his unshakable loneliness, and he does so in the presence of a listener who never interrupts. This silence is not empty. It is patient, absorbing, almost therapeutic. And in this silence, the Ice King finds what he cannot find in the outside world: unconditional company. In bedtime reflections, it is not unlike the way a child whispers secrets to a stuffed animal late at night. The toy cannot answer back, yet the act of speaking becomes a comfort. In Gunter's wide-eyed stares, Ice King sees the reassurance he craves. He can project his fears and his fantasies onto the penguin, knowing they will never be contradicted. Gunter is not just his pet. Gunter is the safe mirror that never cracks, no matter how chaotic the king becomes. And yet mirrors do not only reflect what we wish to see. Sometimes they reflect truths we would rather avoid. This is where Gunter's peculiar independence begins to matter. For all his patience and silence, he does not always obey. He bites when provoked. He wanders off when left alone. He seizes objects that tempt him. These small acts of rebellion echo the Ice King's own contradiction. Just as the king is torn between Simon's forgotten kindness and the crown's manic control, Gunter too exists between obedience and defiance. It is almost as if the penguin channels the Ice King's inner conflict in physical form. Where Ice King wavers between desperation and anger, Gunter squawks or strikes. Where Ice King dreams of control, Gunter sneaks off to seize little fragments of. Where Ice King struggles to keep hold of his fractured identity, Gunter embodies the strangeness of being both many and one. In this way, Gunter is not merely a reflection of the king's loneliness, but of his very state of being. The show underscores this connection in subtle ways. Notice how often Gunter is present in scenes of Ice King's vulnerability. When the king sighs in exhaustion after a failed plan, Gunter is there. When he sulks about being unloved, Gunter is there. When he finds fleeting joy in silly antics, Gunter is again close by. The penguin's presence becomes a visual shorthand for Ice King's isolation, a reminder that his closest relationship is with a creature who cannot speak back. But perhaps that is why the bond endures. Ice King does not want someone to argue with him, to point out the cracks in his logic, to drag Simon Petrikov's buried pain into the light. He wants someone who accepts his reality as it is, fractured and all. Gunter provides that. By staying silent, by being constant, Gunter becomes the perfect companion for a man who cannot bear rejection. And yet, the irony rests heavy here. Gunter is no ordinary penguin. Beneath his silence, there is an ancient secret waiting to surface. The very being Ice King treats as a pet may in fact be far more powerful than the king himself. The reflection, then, is not only of Ice King's loneliness, but of his blindness, his inability to see what truly sits beside him. Still, in this moment of the tale, before cosmic truths surface, we are invited to focus on the intimacy of the bond. Picture the Ice King slouched on his icy throne, rambling about his latest scheme, while Gunter waddles to his side, tilting his head in a wordless acknowledgement. It is almost domestic. It is almost tender. In that frozen palace so full of echoes, the penguin makes it feel just a little less empty. What we see in their companionship is the way isolation shapes relationships. Ice King projects his needs onto Gunter, and in return, Gunter plays the role required of it. It is not a balanced friendship, but it is a necessary. In the king's distorted world, Gunter's loyalty provides stability, the kind of stability that allows him to carry on through endless cycles of failure and disappointment. And here we begin to see the layers of reflection more clearly. Gunter is not simply a mirror of loneliness. He is a mirror of persistence, of survival, of contradictions held within the same fragile form. The more we dwell on this unusual companionship, the clearer it becomes that Gunter functions almost like a diary come to life. Ice King spills his thoughts into the penguin's presence, the way others might scribble words onto paper. He does not expect response or judgment. He only expects to be heard, or at least to imagine that he is. In this way, Gunter becomes the king's emotional storage, holding fragments of his despair, his joy, and his delusion. It is an odd arrangement, but also a deeply human one. Many of us, when faced with loneliness, turn to objects or pets as vessels of our emotion. We pour into them our secrets, our griefs, our fleeting joys, knowing they will not abandon us. The comfort is not in their words, but in their silence. And so, in the bedtime quiet, we understand why Ice King leans so heavily upon his penguin. This, however, reveals another layer to their relationship. For while Gunter's silence comforts, it also enables Ice King's distorted worldview. With no one to challenge him, his wild plans and skewed perceptions go unchecked. In this way, Gunter reflects not only the king's loneliness, but also stubborn isolation. He represents the echo chamber of Ice King's mind, a world where his words bounce endlessly back to him without resistance. And yet, we know there are cracks in this stillness. Gunter does not always play the passive listener. Sometimes he slaps Ice King with a flipper. Sometimes he growls or squeaks with startling defiance. Sometimes he storms away, leaving the king mid-sentence. These acts, small though they may be, mirror the pushback Ice King secretly dreads. They are the fragments of reality intruding upon his comfort, the subtle reminders that even mirrors can distort. This dual role makes Gunter fascinating to observe. He is both comforter and challenger, both silent vessel and unpredictable disruptor. In other words, he reflects not just the Ice King's outward loneliness, but his inner turmoil, the struggle between wanting connection and fearing rejection, between craving stability and fearing change, all play out in miniature through his relationship with the penguin. There are tender examples scattered across episodes that highlight this strange dynamic. In one moment, Ice King might cradle Gunter like a beloved child, cooing at and calling him his precious companion. In another, he might grow angry and scold him, projecting his frustrations onto the one creature he knows will stay. It is a cycle of affection and irritation, dependence and rebellion, and all the while, Gunter never truly leaves. This is why Gunter feels less like a background character and more like an extension of the Ice King himself. In his silence, he embodies Simon's longing for acceptance. In his defiance, he embodies the fragments of sanity that resists complete submission to the crown. He is both the friend the Ice King needs and the thorn he cannot escape. At bedtime, this imagery takes on a softer hue. Imagine a lonely man sitting in his frozen throne room, speaking into the cold air. His words drift, unheard by any human ear. Yet beside him, a small penguin blinks, tilts his head, and squawks in the quiet. It is not dialogue, but it is enough. It is company. And for a man fractured by magic and time, company is everything. Perhaps the greatest reflection Gunter offers, then, is stability. The Ice King's world is one of endless failure. Princesses slip away. Adventurers defeat him. Friends when he makes them vanish almost as quickly as they arrive. Yet Gunter remains. No matter how ridiculous the scheme or how bitter the defeat, the penguin waddles faithfully back into his life. This constancy mirrors the part of Ice King that still endures despite his madness. The part that continues to try, to seek connection, to keep living even when hope seems lost. This paradox, a broken man sustained by a silent penguin, is both tragic and beautiful. It reminds us that even in the strangest relationship, there can be meaning. And it suggests that perhaps companionship, no matter how unconventional, can help us endure even the coldest of winters. If we allow ourselves to drift deeper into this reflection, we begin to see that Gunter does more than listen. He embodies the very contradictions that define the Ice King. Where Ice King is obsessed with power, yet powerless to control his loneliness, Gunter is small, yet occasionally reveals glimpses of strange strength. Where Ice King is desperate for companionship, but constantly drives others away, Gunter is ever-present, yet never quite fully reachable. The penguin is the mirror of the king's fractured self, waddling quietly through every corner of his life. Consider the quiet scenes, the ones often brushed aside as filler. The Ice King sits in his icy chamber, muttering about grand plans or lamenting about rejection. And in the corner of the frame, Gunter shuffles about. He does not always react, but his presence completes the picture. Without Gunter, the Ice King would simply be a lonely man lost in rambling. With Gunter, his ramblings take shape as conversation, even if one-sided. This subtle shift changes everything. Gunter gives form to the Ice King's isolation, turning it into something just a little more bearable. And yet this arrangement is not purely comforting. There is a faint unease that ripples through it. Because Gunter's silence is not truly empty, behind those wide black eyes there seems to be a mind at work, a calculation, an awareness that Ice King never quite perceived. This is what makes the penguin more than a pet, more than a prop. He reflects not only the Ice King's outward loneliness, but also his blindness, the way he cannot see what is truly right in front of him. The more we think about this, the more we notice how often Gunter's behavior mirrors Ice King's emotional states. When Ice King is frustrated, Gunter lashes out. When Ice King is sulking, Gunter shuffles moodily across the floor. When Ice King is at his most delusional, Gunter sometimes grows still, as if silently judging. These parallels suggest that the penguin is not just a bystander, but a subtle echo, amplifying the king's fractured personality. And then there are the rare, startling moments when Gunter takes center stage, when he strikes Ice King with surprising force, when he attempts to wear the crown, when he reveals ambition that no ordinary penguin should possess. These glimpses remind us that mirrors can sometimes distort. Gunter does not always reflect what Ice King wants to see. Instead, he occasionally exposes truths the king cannot admit, that he is fragile, that he is not in control, that his closest companion may not truly belong to him. This tension between comfort and disruption is what makes the relationship so strangely captivating. At night, when the Ice King paces his frozen halls, muttering about princesses who will never love him, it is Gunter who fills the silence. But it is also Gunter who reminds us, with a flick of a flipper or a squawk of defiance, that silence does not always mean submission. Sometimes it means secrets kept close, waiting for the right moment to surface. To think of Gunter as the Ice King's reflection is to see their companionship as both fragile and essential. Fragile, because it is built on imbalance, one figure pouring endlessly, the other receiving without reply. Essential, because without that imbalance, the Ice King might collapse entirely under the weight of his solitude. Gunter is the mirror that allows him to keep speaking, to keep dreaming, to keep existing in a world that has long left him behind. In bedtime quiet, we might imagine the Ice King's inner life, a storm of fractured memories, forgotten loves, and warped ambition. Without Gunter, that storm would rage unchecked, tearing him apart from the inside. With Gunter, there is at least a container for the chaos, a silent presence to absorb the overflow. The penguin does not fix him, but he steadies him. He holds the broken pieces together just enough for the king to carry on. There is tenderness in this, even if it is hidden beneath layers of humor and absurdity. The Ice King may shout at Gunter, may scold him or treat him like a servant, but beneath it all lies dependence. He needs Gunter more than Gunter needs him, and in that imbalance lies a reflection of the human condition itself. The way we cling to others, even imperfect, simply to feel less alone. This is why Gunter's role resonates so strongly when told as a bedtime story, because it reminds us that companionship does not have to be perfect to matter. It can be strange, one-sided, even confusing, yet it still holds power. It still softens the edges of loneliness, and it still shapes who we are, even when we don't realize. As we near the end of this reflection, we begin to see that Gunter's role is not only personal, but symbolic. He stands as a reminder of what the Ice King has lost. Once Simon Petrikov had Betty a partner, a love, a listener who could meet him as an equal. The crown took that from him, leaving him stranded in loneliness. In that absence, he projects those needs onto a penguin. It is tragic, yes, but it is also deeply human. We all search for someone or something to fill the silences we cannot bear. The beauty of adventure time is that it does not mock this dependence. It presents it with humor, yes, but also with tenderness. We laugh at the Ice King's antics, at the absurdity of treating a penguin as a trusted advisor. But beneath the laughter, we feel the weight of his solitude. And when we notice how faithfully Gunter stays, we sense that the companionship, however strange, carries real meaning. This meaning grows even stronger when we consider the hints of depth within Gunter himself. Though he appears content to play the role of pet, his eyes sometimes reveal a knowingness, a slyness, a spark of something more. It is as though he chooses to reflect the Ice King, to stay at his side, even when he could be much more. This choice, subtle and quiet, reframes their bond. Gunter is not trapped. He remains because he wishes to, because on some level he too finds purpose in the Ice King's presence. In this light, the relationship becomes less one-sided than it first appears. Ice King may need Gunter to steady his fractured mind, but perhaps Gunter also needs Ice King to anchor his own strange identity. After all, if we accept that there is more to Gunter than feathers and flippers, then the Ice King provides him with the perfect disguise. Who would suspect a cosmic being hidden beneath the mask of a silly penguin, living quietly in the shadow of a mad king? In reflecting the Ice King's loneliness, Gunter may also be reflecting his own desire for cover, for a place where his secrets can remain safe. This double reflection adds a richness to their story. Two beings, each broken in their own way, each clinging to the other to survive. One shattered by a cursed crown, the other shackled by a cosmic fall. Together they form a companionship that is both absurd and profound. As a bedtime tale, it reminds us of how relationships often work in our own lives. They are rarely balanced. They are rarely simple. Sometimes one gives more, sometimes the other takes more. But what matters is the presence, the willingness to stay, the silent reflection that steadies us when the world feels too heavy. The Ice King and Gunter embody this truth. He needs someone to hear him, someone to witness his endless monologue, someone to assure him he still exists. And Gunter, in his strange silence, gives him that. In return, the penguin receives a place to belong, a cover for his hidden depths, a rhythm of companionship that softens even the coldest nights. It is a relationship full of irony, of course. The king believes himself the master, the one in control, when in reality it is he who depends most. The penguin plays the role of servant, but beneath the mask may hold more power than his master ever dreamed. And yet, despite these ironies, the companionship holds. They need each other, not in equal ways, but in ways that matter. As we move deeper into the story of Gunter, the light-hearted waddles and silly squawks begin to cast longer shadows. For beneath the comedy lies a truth so immense that it reshapes everything we thought we knew. The penguin who shuffled through the Ice King's halls, who squawked at odd times, and stared at the crown with unsettling intensity, was never just a penguin. Within Gunter rests the secret of Orgalorg, an ancient being of cosmic terror, banished from the stars long before the kingdoms of ever rose. The story of Orgalorg begins far from ice and snow. In a time before mortals walked the earth as they do now, the universe itself shuddered under the weight of this entity. Orgalorg was not merely a conqueror, but a consumer of worlds. Vast in power, alien in form, and unrelenting in hunger, Orgalorg threatened the balance of creation. The cosmic entity, those higher beings who oversee the order of existence, could not allow such a force to continue. So they struck, casting Orgalorg down from the heaven, banishing him to earth. But the fall was not a simple one. In crashing to the world below, Orgalorg's body was reshaped, his essence diminished, his terror hidden within a smaller, unassuming form. From galactic devourer to earthbound penguin, the transformation was as cruel as it was poetic. What better prison for a cosmic nightmare than the soft body of a bird waddling harmlessly across the ice? And so Orgalorg slept within the shell of Gunter. Not gone, but contained. Not destroyed, but disguised. What the world saw as a penguin was, in truth, the husk of an ancient power, biding its time in silence. This is why Gunter's gaze sometimes feels so piercing, why his actions occasionally break the pattern of silliness to reveal something darker. The reflection of Orgalorg glimmers just beneath the surface. In bedtime tones, this transformation feels almost like a dream turned inside out. Imagine being a creature that once stretched across the stars, only to awaken in the small body of a penguin, unable to speak your former name, unable to command the cosmos as you once did. The contrast is both tragic and strangely comforting. Tragic because the fall was so complete. Comforting because within that fall lies the reminder that even the most terrifying powers can be humbled by the vastness of creation. The show gives us clues, of course, little moments that hint at something extraordinary hiding behind the flippers. The way Gunter stares at the crown, not with childish curiosity, but with longing, as though remembering power once held. The way he lashes out with surprising violence, striking with force disproportionate to his body. The way his presence feels different from the other penguin, sharper, heavier, as though his feathers weigh more than they should. Each clue whispers of Orgalorg's essence, pressing against the boundaries of his disguise. And when the truth is finally revealed, it feels less like a shock and more like the settling of a long-held suspicion. Of course, there was more to Gunter than met the eye. Of course, this silly, stubborn penguin carried a secret too large to stay hidden forever. The revelation does not erase the humor of his many antics, but it reframes. What once looked like mischief may have been instinct. What once looked like rebellion may have been memory. What once looked like obsession with the crown may have been destiny stirring from its slumber. As bedtime listener, we can pause here and consider what this means for the Ice King's reflection. For all his rambling and loneliness, he has unknowingly kept company with a being older and more dangerous than he could ever imagine. He saw a pet, a servant, a companion. But what he really held in his frozen halls was a fallen god of destruction, hiding in plain sight. The irony is gentle but profound. A man cursed by a crown clings to a penguin for comfort, unaware that the penguin itself carries a curse of its own, one forged in the fires of cosmic judgment. Their companionship, already strange, becomes even stranger when viewed in this light. It is not only the Ice King who is fractured, it is Gunter too. Both are beings reshaped by forces beyond their control, both trapped in roles they did not choose, both bound together in a palace of ice by destiny's quiet hand. The presence of Orgalorg within Gunter casts new light on the penguin's every action. What once felt random or mischievous can be reread as fragments of something ancient pressing through. Think of the times Gunter gazes long at the night sky. To us, it may look like a bird admiring the moon, but in the language of lore, it becomes something heavier, the memory of a fallen conqueror, remembering the stars that once trembled before him. His small black eyes, unblinking, carry a weight that few notice, but those who linger long enough might sense the echo of eternity behind them. The obsession with the Ice King's crown becomes sharper through this lens. The crown, a relic of unimaginable power, calls to Gunter again and again, He snatches it when left unattended. He wears it when he can, and for brief moments, the silliness falls away to reveal a terrifying glimpse of what lies beneath. The union of Orgalorg's essence with the crown's magic is a pairing too dangerous to ignore. It is as though Gunter remembers not only who he was, but also what he might become again. The writers of Adventure Time weave this truth with care, never rushing the reveal. For years, Gunter remained the comic relief, the odd companion who brought lightness to darker tales. But in small, carefully chosen moments, the mask slipped. A violent outburst here, a calculated theft there, a hunger for power that no ordinary penguin should possess. These breadcrumbs were left for us to follow, leading gently toward the revelation that Gunter was, in truth, Orgalorg. There is something deeply poetic about the fall of such a being. Orgalorg, once vast enough to challenge cosmic order, now waddles across the ice, trapped in the body of a creature dismissed as harmless. This fall mirrors the fate of Simon Petrikov himself, once a man of wisdom and love, now lost in the madness of a cursed crown. Both Ice King and Gunter are shadows of their former selves, defined more by what they have lost than what they now are. And yet, there is resilience in these diminished forms, for while Orgalorg's body is small, his essence remains. He still dreams of power, still reaches for the crown, still pushes against the prison of feathers. In the same way, Simon Petrikov remains within the Ice King, his memories buried but never fully erased, his humanity flickering faintly beneath layers of madness. Together, they form a strange companionship, two fallen beings reflecting one another's tragedy without ever truly realizing. This companionship complicates the bedtime story in a beautiful way. When we picture the Ice King speaking to Gunter, we now see more than a lonely man confiding in a pet. We see a fallen king confiding in a fallen god. We see two tragedies woven together, one human and one cosmic, each disguised in forms that hide the true depth of their suffering. It is no longer only humor. It is something deeper, tinged with irony, sorrow, and quiet inevitability. Still, the show never lets us forget the humor. Even as Orgalorg's truth begins to surface, Gunter continues to waddle, to squawk, to knock over bottles and cause small chaos. This balance is what makes Adventure Time so soothing to explore at night. It holds both extremes at once. The laughter of a penguin wearing a crown too large for his head, and the quiet dread of realizing that same penguin carries the weight of forgotten galaxies. For bedtime listeners, this paradox is a gentle reminder of how often greatness hides in small forms, and how often small forms carry greatness unrecognized. We need not choose between the two. Gunter is both the comic penguin and the cosmic terror, the servant of a mad king and the shadow of a world devourer. The contradiction is not something to resolve, but something to rest with, like a dream that holds two truths at once. When we stretch our gaze beyond the snowy mountains of Oo, we can almost imagine the shape Orgalorg once carried. Vast, alien, and strange, a being not bound by the softness of feathers, but by the terrible hunger to consume. The lore tells us that Orgalorg's power was so great that he sought dominion not just over lands or kingdoms, but over the very fabric of existence. His ambition was not to rule, but to devour, to expand until there was nothing left beyond him. This is the shadow hidden in the penguin's eyes, the echo of an appetite that once rattled the stars. The cosmic entities, those timeless keepers of balance, could not allow such hunger to continue. They struck with force beyond comprehension, casting Orgalorg down. The fall was not merely punishment, but transformation. Stripped of his form, his essence squeezed into the smallest of cages, the body of a penguin. Here lies the irony at the heart of his tale. The devourer of worlds reduced to a waddling creature, mocked by his own disguise. What had been immense was now tiny. What had been terrifying was now almost laughable. And yet, Orgalorg did not die. He endured, hidden in plain sight. For countless ages, he drifted within the body of Gunter, the Ice King's closest companion. He listened to rambling, swept icy floors, played at being harmless, all while fragments of his ancient self stirred beneath the surface. To those who passed through the Ice Kingdom, he was only a pet, but the universe remembers. And sometimes, when Gunter squawked with unusual ferocity or glared with unsettling focus, the memory of Orgalorg slipped through. This duality invites us to reflect on how power can be hidden, waiting for its moment. The world of Ooh is full of oddities that seem silly until we pause to look closer. Candy people who hide sharp intelligence, old artifacts that carry worlds of meaning, and now a penguin who carries the husk of a god. Gunter, in his quiet disguise, reminds us that appearances rarely tell the whole story. Even the smallest shapes may shelter galaxies of history. One of the most striking symbols of Orgalorg's persistence is his obsession with the crown. Time and again, Gunter reaches. He waddles toward it with determination. He seizes it when the Ice King is careless. He places it upon his head with a seriousness that seems out of step with his comic nature. For a moment, the air changes. The silliness dissolves, and in the stillness, we glimpse what it might look like for Orgalorg to awaken once more. The connection between the crown and Orgalorg's essence is layered in mystery. Perhaps it is that the crown, too, is a relic of cosmic power, a magnet for beings like him. Or perhaps it is memory, the instinct of a conqueror reaching for any tool that might restore his might. Whatever the reason, the crown becomes the thread that ties Gunter's disguise to his true self. It is not only Ice King who is bound to it, but Gunter as well, both drawn by forces they cannot resist. This raises gentle questions about destiny. If Orgalorg was cast down, was it fate that he should land within the Ice King's domain? Was it mere chance, or was the pairing chosen by the quiet hand of the universe? The Mad King and the fallen god bound together in ice, each broken in their own way. It feels almost too perfect to be coincidence. And in Adventure Time, coincidence often hides deeper design. When viewed this way, their companionship takes on a new shape. It is no longer only about loneliness or reflection. It becomes about fate drawing two shattered beings together, giving them roles to play in one another's story. The Ice King, cursed by a crown he does not understand. Gunter, the cosmic terror trapped in a body too small to contain him. Together they mirror the theme that runs through all of Ooh. That power and tragedy often live side by side, disguised in the strangest forms. At night, when we let our minds drift into these cosmic reflections, we can almost feel the unease that such knowledge carries. To know that a penguin might hold within him the hunger of galaxy is to recognize how fragile the world truly is. Yet Adventure Time never delivers this truth with dread. It delivers it with gentleness, wrapping the terror in comedy, easing us into the paradox as though it were a lullaby. In this way, even Orgalorg's reveal becomes part of the bedtime rhythm. We are not startled awake by his truth. We are lulled into it slowly, until it feels natural to accept that Gunter is both penguin and god. And in this acceptance lies a lesson. Power does not always look like power. Sometimes it hides in the background, waiting. Sometimes it waddles across the screen in feathers, squawking at odd times. Sometimes it listens quietly, reflecting the loneliness of a cursed king. And when the mask finally slips, we realize that the signs were always there. We simply needed to slow down and see them. As the veil fully lifts on Gunter's secret, we are invited to see his story not as a sudden twist, but as the slow unveiling of something long hidden. The show never rushed to tell us that he was Orgalorg. Instead, it allowed the truth to ripple through in fragments, letting us laugh, wonder, and finally pause in realization. It is a reminder that even the strangest revelations often sit quietly in plain sight, waiting for us to notice. The reveal of Orgalorg reframes the companionship of Ice King and Gunter in ways both tender and tragic. For years, the Ice King believed he was the master, that the penguin was his loyal pet. Yet in truth, the creature by his side was far older, far more powerful, far more dangerous than he could imagine. This irony adds a new layer of depth to their bond. The lonely man, shattered by his cursed crown, clings to a penguin for comfort, not realizing he is clinging to something that once terrified the cosmos itself. and yet the relationship still feels genuine. For even if Orgalorg's essence lingers within, Gunter has lived long as a penguin. He has waddled, squawked, misbehaved, and shared his days with the Ice King. These years cannot be erased, and so the cosmic terror and the silly companion become inseparable. Gunter is both, and perhaps he always will be. There is a bedtime beauty in this paradox. It tells us that identity is rarely singular. We are not just what we were, not just what we might become, but all the selves we have carried along the way. Orgalorg may have been vast and terrifying, but Gunter has been loyal and mischievous, playful and strange. Both truths live together in the same small body. Both truths define who he is. The moments when Gunter brushes against his true power are some of the most striking in the series. When he seizes the crown, when his eyes flare with otherworldly energy, when the air around him seems to shiver with something ancient, these glimpses remind us that the disguise can only hold so tightly. Yet the show never lingers long on these bursts of revelation. They pass quickly, allowing Gunter to return to his role as comic relief. This rhythm creates a dreamlike quality. We see the truth for a moment, then it slips away, leaving us to wonder if we imagined it. It is in these fleeting moments that Orgalorg feels most alive, not when he devours worlds, but when he stirs within feathers, pressing faintly against the boundaries of the sky. The bedtime lesson here is quiet, but powerful. Even when diminished, even when hidden, parts of us remain. They whisper through our action, through our obsession, through the things we cannot resist reaching for. For Orgalorg, that whisper is the crown. For Simon Petrikov, it is the memory of Betty. Both reach endlessly for what they have lost, unable to let go, unable to stop them. And in their reaching, they reveal the persistence of identity. No matter how much the universe reshapes us, something remains tugging at us in the dark. Now that we have uncovered the truth of Orgalorg, Gunter's smallest actions take on an entirely new weight. What once looked like silly disobedience becomes a quiet rebellion, and what once seemed like random mischief begins to feel like the shadow of a dream too large for his small body. In this part of the tale, we pause to follow those moments when Gunter broke free from his role as silent companion and reached toward something greater. Something darker, something that reminded the world of who he truly was beneath the feather. Isasaniu, we begin with his fascination for the crown. From the earliest days, Gunter's attraction to it feels different than the playful curiosity of other penguins. While the rest of the flock may nudge or peck at treasures, Gunter seizes the crown with fierce intention. He places it on his head as though remembering an old ritual, as though the weight of it belongs to him. In these moments, his eyes glimmer with something strange, and for a breath, the palace grows quieter. It is the faint stirring of Orgalorg, the old dream of dominion pushing through the mask of a penguin. The crown is not the only symbol of his rebellion. Gunter often acts against the Ice King's wishes, striking him with surprising violence or storming away in defiance. These outbursts may seem comical at first, but they echo the imbalance of their companionship. The Ice King believes he commands Gunter, yet the penguin repeatedly shows that he cannot be controlled. Each slap of a flipper, each squawk of protest, is a reminder that beneath his loyal disguise lives a being who once defied the cosmos itself. Some of Gunter's rebellions take quieter forms. He steals, he hoards, he hides objects, as though collecting fragments of power. These little acts of mischief carry echoes of the hunger Orgalorg once held, the instinct to claim, to gather, to own. In a bedtime reflection, they feel like dreams leaking into waking life. A fallen god cannot devour worlds anymore, but he can tuck away treasures in the shadows of a frozen palace. Small acts, yes, but full of memory. One of the most striking instances of Gunter's rebellion comes when he seizes control of the Ice Kingdom itself. With the crown upon his head, he transforms, no longer the waddling companion, but a ruler in his own right. The image is both humorous and unsettling. The smallest creature, long treated as a pet, suddenly becomes master. This role reversal mirrors the secret truth of his identity. Gunter was never truly beneath the Ice King. He was always something greater, hiding in plain sight. And yet these acts of rebellion are fleeting. The crown slips away, the power fades, the penguin returns. This rhythm is part of the dreamlike quality of story. For every glimpse of Orgalorg, there is a return to Gunter. For every rebellion, a return to companionship. It is as though the universe itself keeps tugging him back his disguise, reminding him that his time of dominion has passed, even if his dreams linger. There is also tenderness in the way these rebellions unfold. They are not grand wars or cosmic battle. They are small, domestic moments in the Ice Kingdom, a penguin stealing a crown, a flipper striking a king, a stash of objects hidden in icy corners. And yet in their smallness, they carry immense meaning. They remind us that power does not always reveal itself in grand gesture. Sometimes it whispers through tiny acts of defiance, through the things we refuse to let go of, even when the world insists we must. For bedtime listeners, this is a gentle lesson. We all carry dreams within us, some too large for the lives we now lead. Sometimes those dreams slip out in small rebellions, in little acts that defy the roles placed upon us. They may not change the world, but they remind us of who we once were, or who we still long to be. Gunter's rebellions, whether comic or terrifying, are echoes of Orgalorg's dream of domination. And in their echoes, we see the persistence of identity. When we slow down and look closely, we see that each of Gunter's rebellions comes with its own kind of symbolism. The slaps he delivers to the Ice King's face, for example, are more than just comic timing. They feel like tiny reminders that Gunter is not merely a servant. He is capable of standing apart, of asserting himself even against the one who believes he has control. The penguin may seem powerless, but in those small, defiant gestures, he claims a spark of the authority he once commanded as Orgalorg. The Ice King, of course, never truly understands these moments. To him, they are simply quirks of his pet. But to us, they reveal the duality of Gunter's life. He is caught between roles: the pet who listens and the ancient being who remembers. This tension explains why his rebellions flare up suddenly and fade just as quickly. He is never fully Gunter, never fully Orgalorg, but always a shifting balance of both. Sometimes the rebellion takes a gentler form, expressed not in violence but in independence. Gunter has been seen wandering off on his own adventures, slipping from the Ice King's shadow to pursue his own path. In these moments, we are reminded that he is not bound by loyalty alone. He has his own motive, his own curiosity, his own will to act beyond the role he has been given. It is easy to imagine these wanderings as the stirrings of Orgalorg's memory, pushing the penguin to test the boundaries of his disguise. There are also the times when Gunter interacts with others in ways that surprise us. He can be affectionate, clinging to those he chooses, or hostile, snapping at those who cross him. These shifts remind us of Orgalorg's vastness. For even though the body is small, the range of his spirit is immense. He is capable of warmth, capable of cruelty, capable of acting in ways that feel too complex for an ordinary penguin. The clearest echoes of his old power, though, always circle back to the crown. Each time he touches it, we see the lines between Gunter and Orgalorg blur. For brief moments, he is more than a penguin. His squawks turn guttural. His eyes gleam with otherworldly intensity, and the crown responds to him as though recognizing a kindred force. These moments never last long, but they remind us of what once was and what could be again if the disguise were to fully break. Even when he does not wear the crown, Gunter's dreams of domination surface in subtler ways. He collects objects, hides them away, and guards them with fierce protective. This hoarding instinct feels like a shadow of Orgalorg's hunger, reduced from devouring worlds to gathering trinkets, but carrying the same energy of possession. It is almost as though his body cannot act on his true nature, but his spirit finds smaller ways to express it. This is why Gunter's rebellions are so important to his story. They are not simply comic relief. They are fragments of Orgalorg pressing through, moments where the truth refuses to remain hidden. Each act, whether violent or playful, carries echoes of the being he once was. Together, they form a quiet pattern, one that reveals how even the smallest creatures can carry dreams too large for their present life. In the stillness of bedtime, this becomes a reflection on identity itself. We all carry parts of ourselves that cannot always be expressed. We all hold dreams that slip through in small acts, in moments of rebellion against the roles others expect us to play. Gunter's story shows us that these rebellions matter. They may seem small, but they remind us that our deeper selves are still alive, still waiting, still dreaming. When Gunter's rebellions grow large enough to shift the entire Ice Kingdom, we begin to glimpse just how thin the boundary is between his disguise and his true self. One of the most striking examples is the time he placed the crown upon his head and, for a brief moment, transformed into something more than a penguin. The shift was both humorous and chilling. Suddenly, the smallest and silliest character in the room held dominion, and the Ice King himself was forced to watch as his supposed pet became the master. In this reversal lies an echo of Orgalorg's old dream of domination. Though his form has diminished, the instinct to rule, to command, still lingers. Even if only for a fleeting moment, Gunter seizing the crown reminds us of what he once was, a conqueror who once reached for the stars themselves. The rebellion may pass quickly, but its memory lingers like a dream that refuses to fade upon waking. There are other moments when Gunter's actions ripple far beyond comic mischief. His capacity for violence, though often hidden behind waddles and squeaks, bursts forth in sudden displays that shock even those closest to him. The slap of a flipper against the Ice King, the sharp squawk that cuts through the silence, the unexpected destruction he sometimes causes. These are not the actions of a simple pet. They are reminders that power and rebellion can hide in even the smallest form. In softer ways, too, Gunter resists the roles imposed on him. He does not remain quietly in the Ice Kingdom when opportunity calls. He ventures outward, finding ways to insert himself into events far larger than his own life. Whether by accident or intention, he pushes against the boundaries of his role, as though the universe itself cannot keep him contained. Each escape, each intrusion into stories beyond the palace, becomes another act of rebellion, another whisper of Orgalorg stirring. What makes these rebellions so compelling is their rhythm. They rise suddenly, powerful and undeniable, then fade back into silence, leaving only the waddling of a penguin behind. This rhythm mirrors the experience of dream. A dream might swell with intensity, filling us with emotions too large to contain, only to dissolve when we open our eyes. Gunter lives this rhythm. His rebellions are dreams of domination, brief but unforgettable, always reminding us of the truth beneath his disguise. And yet, even these acts are not without tenderness. There is something strangely endearing about the way Gunter reaches for power. He does not roar with cosmic might or declare his dominion in grand speeches. He waddles, he squeaks, he flails his flippers as though the vastness of Orgalorg can only emerge in fragments through the limits of a penguin's body. The result is both unsettling and oddly comforting. We are reminded that even the greatest powers, when reduced, can become familiar and almost lovable. This paradox is central to his story. Gunter's rebellions are dangerous, yes, but they are also part of what makes him compelling. Without them, he would be only a silent companion. With them, he becomes a mystery, a question that lingers with every appearance. What drives him? Is it loyalty? Is it instinct? Or is it the dream of Orgalorg pushing through, demanding to be remembered? The answer, perhaps, is all of these at once, and this complexity makes Gunter's rebellions more than just plot points. They are symbols of persistence. They remind us that identity, once formed, cannot be erased completely. It may be hidden, diminished, disguised, but it will always find ways to resurface. In every crown seized, every act of defiance, every object tucked away in secret, Orgalorg whispered that he is still here. For us as bedtime listeners, this becomes a reflection on our own inner rebellion. How often do we, too, carry parts of it that slip out in unexpected ways? How often do we rebel against the roles others assign us, even if only through small acts that go unnoticed? Gunter's story reassures us that these moments matter. They are not accidents. They are reminders of who we are beneath the disguises we wear. So when we see a penguin slap his king, or place a crown upon his head, or waddle defiantly away from commands, we know it is more than comedy. It is the echo of a cosmic dream, a dream of domination that refuses to fade, a rebellion that cannot be silenced, even in the smallest of form. If we rest for a while with the idea of rebellion, we see that Gunter's acts are not only about power, they are also about a longing. Beneath every theft of the crown, every stash of hidden treasure, every sudden burst of violence, lies the echo of something older than the Ice Kingdom itself. It is the longing of Orgalorg not simply to rule, but to be remembered. Power fades when it is forgotten, and so each act of rebellion becomes a way for Orgalorg to remind the world that he still exists, even if disguised in the body of a penguin. This longing explains the peculiar consistency of Gunter's defiance. No matter how many times he is scolded, pushed aside, or treated as insignificant, he returns to these small rebellions. It is as if the instincts of Orgalorg cannot be silenced, no matter how many ages pass. The crown calls to him because it is a vessel of power, but also because it is recognition. In placing it upon his head, Gunter remembers himself, even if only for a moment. He feels whole. The Ice King, lost in his own fractured mind, never grasps the meaning of these rebellions. He treats them as nuisance, moments of irritation, or odd quirks of his pet. This blindness adds a quiet sadness to the tale. For in his loneliness, the Ice King does not realize that his closest companion is fighting his own battle, a battle not to dominate the cosmos, but to hold on to the memory of who he once was. The irony is gentle but profound. The king thinks himself the master, yet it is his pet who carries the deeper story. Sometimes the rebellions become more symbolic than practical. A stolen bottle, a shattered object, a refusal to obey. These small acts may not change the kingdom, but they shift the balance within Gunter himself. They are affirmations of existence. For every act of obedience, there must be an act of rebellion, a reminder that he is more than the role imposed upon him. In this balance lies the rhythm of his life, the push and pull between Gunter and Orgalorg, between disguise and memory. And yet, there is tenderness even here, because while his rebellions remind us of Orgalorg, they also reveal how much Gunter has become his own being. He is not fully the cosmic terror he once was, but neither is he only a penguin. His identity now is a weaving of both, shaped by rebellion, by companionship, and by the long years spent at the side of a lonely king. The dreams of domination may never be fulfilled, but the acts of rebellion ensure that they are never forgotten. This blend of tragedy and comedy is what makes Gunter's story so soothing to explore at night. We laugh when he slaps the Ice King or waddles away with the crown, but behind the laughter is a quiet sorrow, the sorrow of a being who remembers greatness and can only express it in fragments. In bedtime tones, it becomes a reflection on how all of us carry pieces of our past selves, slipping out in ways that seem small, but carry deep meaning. So we leave this chapter with an image both funny and haunting. A penguin waddling through frozen halls, crown slipping down his head, eyes glinting with the memory of stars. He squawks defiantly, flaps his wings, and for a moment, the world seems to tilt toward his will. Then the crown falls, the moment passes, and he is once again Gunter, waddling back into the rhythm of the Ice Kingdom. But the rebellion never truly ends. It lingers, waiting for the next chance, the next act, the next reminder. Because Orgalorg may be trapped, but he is never gone. And in every dream of domination, in every act of rebellion, he whispers that he still lives. Up to this point, we have followed Gunter as a companion, a reflection, and a vessel of rebellion. But in this chapter of the tale, we begin to ask a quieter, deeper question. Why does he stay? Why does a being as ancient and powerful as Orgalorg, even trapped in the body of a penguin, choose to remain at the side of the Ice King? The halls of Oo are vast. The stars above still whisper of his old dominion. And yet, again and again, we find him waddling back to the frozen palace, settling into the rhythm of life beside a lonely, broken man. At first, it might seem that this is fate. After all, Gunter was cast down to earth, reshaped into a penguin, and somehow ended up within the Ice King's kingdom. Perhaps it was chance, perhaps it was the pull of the crown, or perhaps it was the quiet hand of destiny guiding two fractured beings toward one another. In the dreamlike logic of Adventure Time, fate often works in this way, drawing unlikely threads together until they weave into patterns we cannot ignore. And yet when we slow down and look carefully, there is also choice in Gunter's action. He is not bound by chains. He is not magically tied to the Ice King's side. He could wander far, could vanish into the wilderness of Oo, could seek power elsewhere, but he does not. Again and again he chooses to return, to remain, to share in the strange companionship of the Ice Kingdom. This paradox, fate and choice intertwining, is what makes their bond so fascinating. On one hand, it feels inevitable. The lonely king and the fallen god, bound together in ice, mirrors of each other's tragedy. On the other hand, it feels intentional. For beneath Orgalorg's hunger, beneath Gunter's mischief, there is a loyalty that cannot be dismissed. It may not be love in the way Ice King imagines, but it is a form of devotion nonetheless. We can see this devotion in the way Gunter tolerates Ice King's endless rambling. Day after day, the king pours out his frustrations and dreams, and the penguin listens. He may squawk and protest, may wander off or rebel, but he always returns. For someone who once devoured worlds, this patience is remarkable. It suggests that the bond is not only about fate binding them, but about a choice to remain, even when he could leave. There is tenderness here, even wrapped in absurdity. The Ice King is not an easy companion. He is erratic, selfish, often cruel in small ways without realizing. And yet Gunter endures him. More than that, he grounds him. Without Gunter, the king's palace would be empty of life, a hollow echo of loneliness. With Gunter, there is at least a presence, a rhythm, a reminder that he is not entirely alone. This raises a gentle possibility. Perhaps Gunter, in his own way, recognizes the tragedy of Simon Petrikov, even if he does not speak it aloud. Perhaps in remaining at the Ice King's side, he fulfills not only his own fate, but also a kind of quiet mercy. For if he were to leave, the king would crumble into silence. By staying, Gunter gives him stability, however fragile. And in that act of staying, we glimpse something more human than cosmic, as the simple choice of companionship. In bedtime tones, this becomes a reflection on how bonds are never purely destiny or purely choice. They are always both. We are drawn to certain people by forces we cannot explain, and yet we also choose, day after day, whether to remain. Gunter's story embodies this balance. He may have been cast down by the cosmos, fated to live as a penguin, but in staying with the Ice King, he chooses to turn fate into companionship, to turn punishment into something that, in its own way, resembles home. When we sit with this paradox of choice and fate, the quiet details of Gunter's life with the Ice King begin to shine brighter. Think of how many times Gunter could have walked away. The world of Oo is filled with kingdoms warmer, kinder, and far more stable than the frozen palace of a man cursed by madness. Yet Gunter does not seek them. He returns to the place where loneliness echoes through icy corridors, where he is often scolded, often ignored, and sometimes even struck. The question lingers, why remain in such a place? Perhaps part of the answer lies in recognition. Beneath the feathers, Orgalorg is still a fallen being who once reached too high, who once defied the balance of the cosmos and was cast down. In Simon Petrikov, now the Ice King, there is a similar fall. He too reached for power he could not control. He too was reshaped into something unrecognizable, bound by forces greater than himself. Though they never speak of it, their bond may come from this shared truth. Each sees in the other a reflection of their own tragedy, and in that reflection, they find a reason to remain. Yet recognition alone is not enough. What makes their companionship endure is the choice to act upon it. For Gunter, this choice is subtle, but unmistakable. He does not simply tolerate the Ice King. He participates in his life. He listens to his endless rants, tends to his chaotic household, and even joins him in his scheme. These actions are not forced. They are chosen. And through them, Gunter transforms his fate into something livable, something less like a prison and more like a partnership. This is not to say the bond is free of imbalance. The Ice King rarely recognizes the depth of what Gunter provides. He treats him as a servant, as a pet, as a figure of convenience. Yet, even through this imbalance, the companionship holds. Gunter stays not because the king treats him well, but because staying has become his own choice. It is a reminder that bonds often survive not because they are fair, but because they carry meaning that cannot be easily measured. There is also the possibility that Gunter, in his ancient awareness, sees something of hope in the Ice King. For though Simon Petrikov is buried beneath layers of madness, fragments of him remain. We see them flicker when he shows kindness, when he remembers Betty, when he protects others despite his own brokenness. Perhaps Gunter, beneath his disguise, chooses to remain because he recognizes this humanity, however faint. In the companionship of the Ice Kingdom, he sees not only fate, but the chance to witness redemption. From another angle, the choice to stay may also be Gunter's rebellion against fate itself. Orgalorg was punished, diminished, cast down to live in feathers instead of fire. Yet instead of wandering aimlessly in despair, he chooses to build a bond. He chooses to root himself in companionship, however strained. In this light, his staying becomes not a submission, but a defiance. He takes the punishment handed to him by the cosmos and turns it into something meaningful. In the soft rhythm of a bedtime tale, this becomes a lesson about resilience. Even when fate reshapes us in ways we did not choose, we still hold the power to decide how we live with it. Gunter's choice to remain is his way of turning exile into home, of turning punishment into purpose. And through that choice, he shows us that identity is not only what happens to us, but also how we respond to what happened. As we wander deeper into the halls of their companionship, it becomes clear that Gunter's decision to stay is more than survival. It is a quiet affirmation of belonging. For all of Orgalorg's ancient hunger, for all of his dreams of domination, there is something deeply grounding in the rhythms of the Ice King, the daily chores, the predictable rambles of the Ice King, the silent stretches of time spent together. These small patterns form a kind of stability that even cosmic beings may crave. After all, what is power without connection? What is dominion without the presence of another to share it with? In the Ice King, Gunter finds not equality, but familiarity. They are both broken, both diminished, both bound by forces larger than themselves, and yet they both endure. There is comfort in this shared endurance. In remaining at the king's side, Gunter does not erase his own tragedy, but he softens. The Ice King, in turn, finds solace in the penguin's constancy, even if he never fully understands it. Together, they turn the palace of ice into something more than a prison. They make it, in their own strange way, a home. The interplay of choice and fate can be seen most clearly when Gunter resists opportunities to leave. There are moments when chaos pulls him into adventures far beyond the Ice King. He could slip away then, vanish into the world, and never return. But he does return every time. This pattern reveals something profound. His fate may have brought him to the Ice King, but his choice keeps him there. Fate may bind, but choice sustains. This choice is not without irony, for in staying, Gunter allows his ancient ambitions to remain subdued. He does not roam the stars or consume worlds. He remains in the background, listening, rebelling in small ways, dreaming in silence. But perhaps that is the point. Perhaps he has chosen to exchange conquest for companionship, hunger for loyalty, power for presence. If so, it is one of the most remarkable rebellions of all. A rebellion not against the Ice King, but against the destiny handed to him by the cosmos. There is beauty in this act of staying. It suggests that companionship can be more powerful than dominion. For Orgalorg once sought to swallow creation itself, and yet, as Gunter, he chooses instead to remain with a single companion. This shift in scale is striking. It tells us that bonds are not measured by size, but by meaning. A fallen god of destruction finds more purpose in being the penguin beside a lonely king than in ruling a universe alone. And in this, Gunter mirrors something deeply human. We too are often faced with the tension between what fate hands us and what choices we make in response. We may not control the forces that shape us, but we can control the way we live with them. Gunter shows us that even a punishment can become a place of belonging if we choose to see it that way. Even exile can be softened by the act of staying, by the act of turning toward companionship instead of away from it. At night, as we imagine the frozen halls of the Ice Kingdom, it becomes easier to see this bond as more than strange comedy. It becomes a meditation on endurance. The king rambles, the penguin squawks, and the cycle repeats. It is not glamorous, but it is steady. And in that steadiness lies the quiet victory of both fate and choice. Fate placed them together, but choice keeps them bound. This is why their companionship feels so enduring. It is not dependent on recognition or reward. The Ice King does not often thank Gunter, nor does he even realize the depth of what the penguin offers him. Yet Gunter stays anyway. He does not stay for praise or for power, but because staying itself has become meaningful. This is the paradox of bond. Sometimes we choose them not because they are easy, but because they feel inevitable in our hearts. If we let the picture linger, a mad king muttering to himself and a penguin waddling faithfully at his side, we begin to understand that their companionship is not simply about survival. It is about meaning. For the Ice King, Gunter gives his lonely palace rhythm, a presence to steady the endless echo of his thoughts. For Gunter, the Ice King offers something just as valuable: continuity. To remain in one place with one companion is to resist the chaos of fate. It is to turn a story of exile into a story of belonging. This sense of belonging carries with it a quiet power. Orgalorg may never again dominate the stars, but as Gunter he has found a role that endures, not as a conqueror, but as a companion, not as a terror, but as a mirror. The irony is gentle, but also poetic. The very being who once sought to consume the universe now spends his days sweeping ice floors, squawking at nonsense, and providing comfort to a man who has lost everything. From the outside, it may look like diminishment, but from within, it feels like transformation. The interplay between fate and choice also reveals itself in the way their story continues, despite imbalance. Ice King believes he holds authority, but in truth it is Gunter who carries the greater power. And yet Gunter chooses not to dominate. He chooses not to reveal himself fully. He allows the bond to remain as it is, imperfect and unbalanced, because in that imperfection lies a strange form of peace. He does not need to reclaim his cosmic throne to have meaning. Meaning comes from the act of staying. There are bedtime lessons woven into this truth. Fate shapes the outlines of our stories, but it is our choices that fill them in. Gunter could have let exile consume him. He could have wandered endlessly, bitter at what he had lost. Instead, he chose to remain, to form a companionship that gave shape to his existence. In doing so, he reminds us that even the harshest fate can be softened by the choices we make in response. This companionship, though strange, also gives the Ice King something invaluable. Without Gunter, his loneliness would likely have devoured him long ago. Without Gunter, the palace would be nothing but silence and ice. By choosing to stay, Gunter does not only give himself meaning, he gives the Ice King reason to endure. And so their bond becomes mutual, even if it is not recognized. The king needs the penguin, and the penguin, in his own way, chooses to need the king. In the end, the bond between them is neither entirely choice nor entirely fate. It is the weaving of both. Fate casts them together, broken and diminished. Choice keeps them together, shaping exile into companionship. And through this weaving, they show us that bonds do not need to be perfect to matter. They can be messy, unbalanced, and even absurd. But if they give us reason to endure, they are enough. So as we close this chapter, picture the frozen kingdom one last time. The Ice King rambles, words spilling into the cold air, his crown glinting faintly under the moonlight. Gunter listened, silent and steady, his eyes reflecting something both ancient and loyal. It is a strange companionship born of fate and sustained by choice. But it is real, and in its quiet endurance it becomes one of the most meaningful bonds in all of Oo. As we arrive at the final stretch of Gunter's tale, the story takes on a new shape. For so long, we have known him as the penguin beside the Ice King, as the vessel of Orgalorg, as the small figure who rebelled in flashes of mischief and longing. But there comes a moment when Gunter's role changes completely, when he steps out from behind the shadow of companionship and reveals a new destiny. He becomes not just a reflection of power, but a wielder. He becomes, in his own way, a creator. The moment is almost surreal. Gunter, the penguin we have followed through countless squawks and waddles, seizes the Ice King's crown once again. But this time, he does not simply wear it for mischief, nor does he cast it aside after a brief display of rebellion. He embraces it fully, letting its magic fuse with the essence of Orgalorg still stirring inside him. In that instant, he transforms into something greater ice thing, a being who carries both the identity of Gunter and the mantle of ruler. The image of Gunter reshaped by the crown is striking. The crown, which once shattered Simon Petrikov, becomes in Gunter's wings a tool of authorship. Where Simon was broken, Gunter seems to thrive. Where the crown consumed a man, it empowers a penguin. The irony could not be sharper nor more poetic. For the being who was once Orgalorg, cast down and humbled, now rises again, not as a devourer of worlds, but as the architect of his own destiny. This transformation reframes everything I've seen before. The dreams of domination that surfaced in his rebellions were not only echoes of the past, they were glimpses of a future yet to come. The longing that drove him to the crown again and again was not only instinct, it was destiny calling him toward authorship. By embracing the crown, Gunter does not merely remember Orgalorg, he surpasses it. He creates something new, a form that blends the cosmic and the comic, the terror of the past and the silliness of the present. There is something deeply bedtime-like about this transformation. It is not loud or violent. It does not erase the years of companionship or mischief. Instead, it folds them in, weaving them into the new identity of Ice Thing. Gunter carries his past selves with him, the loyal companion, the mischievous rebel, the fallen god, and turns them into the foundation of something greater. In this way, his transformation feels less like a conquest and more like a natural evolution, the quiet flowering of a story, long in the making. This act of creation also raises gentle questions about what it means to wield power. The crown destroyed Simon, but it empowers Gunter. Why? Perhaps because Simon resisted it, clinging to who he once was, while Gunter accepts it, allowing it to become part of his identity. Perhaps because Gunter, already diminished and reshaped by the cosmos, has learned how to live within contradiction. Or perhaps because the crown, fickle and ancient, responds differently to those who embrace rather than resist its burden. Whatever the reason, the result is clear. Gunter steps beyond his old role. He is no longer just a companion, no longer just a vessel, no longer just a rebel. He becomes a creator of his own future, shaping himself into Ice Thing, and in doing so, he claims a destiny that is neither wholly Orgalorg nor wholly penguin. It is uniquely his. In bedtime tones, this moment becomes a reflection on growth. We are not forever trapped by the identities of our past. We may carry them, yes, but we can also shape them into something new. Gunter shows us that even a fall from the stars, even an exile into feathers, can end in authorship. The future does not have to mirror the past. It can be created, chosen, embraced. The rise of Ice Thing is more than a change of form. It is a statement. For so long, Gunter lived in roles assigned to him: pet, servant, reflection, vessel, rebel. But when he embraces the crown and allows its magic to flow through him, he steps into authorship. He does not simply echo Orgalorg's hunger or repeat the Ice King's madness. Instead, he shapes a new path, one that belongs entirely to him. This is why the image of Gunter crowned feels so powerful. It is the moment when he ceases to be defined by others and becomes, at last, his own master. The crown, heavy with cosmic power, reveals itself differently in Gunter's flippers than it ever did in Simon's hand. With Simon, the crown fractured, unraveling his mind until he became a shadow of who he once was. But with Gunter, it integrates. It bends, it fuses, it transforms without breaking him. Perhaps this is because Gunter, as Orgalorg, already knows what it is to be diminished and reshaped. He has already lived through the fall, from greatness. The crown does not unmake him because he has nothing left to lose. Instead, it becomes a canvas for his creation. And what does he create? He creates a future that reflects his own contradiction. As Ice Thing, he is both majestic and absurd, powerful and comical. He is a ruler who does not erase his penguin self, but carries it forward proudly, flippers and all. The crown elevates him, yes, but it does not strip away the essence of Gunter. He remains himself and yet something more. In this balance, he achieves what neither Simon nor Orgalorg could. Simon lost himself to the crown. Orgalorg lost himself to exile. But Gunter, by embracing both, finds a way to transform them into harmony. This is why bedtime reflection is so important here. Gunter's transformation is not just about power. It is about acceptance. He does not fight his past selves, nor does he cling desperately. He allows them all to exist within him, woven together into something new. This act of integration becomes the quiet secret of his strength. For while others in Ooh are often torn apart by the contradictions of who they were and who they have become, Gunter thrives in them. He becomes both penguin and god, both servant and master, both comic relief and creator. It is telling that this transformation does not erase his bond with the Ice King. Though he surpasses the role of pet, he does not abandon the one who gave his exile meaning. In choosing to embrace the crown, Gunter does not cast aside companionship. Instead, he carries it forward, weaving the bond into his new destiny. This is why the story feels less like a conquest and more like a continuation. Gunter does not destroy the world to prove himself. He reshapes his own existence in a way that honors where he has been. In this light, Gunter's authorship becomes a symbol of growth that does not reject the past, but transforms it. The fall of Orgalorg, the mischief of Gunter, the companionship with the Ice King, all of these threads are drawn together in his transformation into Ice Thing. He is not trapped in exile anymore. He is not only defined by rebellion, he is a creator now, shaping his own path out of the pieces of everything he has been. This moment carries a bedtime lesson as well. Growth is not about erasing who we were, nor is it about pretending the past never happened. It is about weaving all those selves into something new, something truer to who we are becoming. Just as Gunter took the roles of servant, rebel, and exile and turned them into the foundation of his future, so too can we carry our past without being trapped by it. When we pause to reflect on the image of Gunter crowned as Ice Thing, the contrast with Simon Petrikov becomes even sharper. Simon was undone by the crown because he resisted its pull. He clung to the man he once was, and the magic tore at him until there was nothing left but fragments of memory and madness. Orgalorg, in his own way, was undone by resistance as well. He tried to dominate the cosmos, to bend everything to his hunger, and was cast down because of it. But Gunter does not resist, nor does he seek to dominate. He accepts, he embraces. He allows the contradictions to settle within him, layers of snow, each one softening the next until the weight becomes bearable. It is this acceptance that transforms him into a creator. The crown does not unmake him because he does not fight it. The past does not break him because he does not deny it. In this gentleness, he finds strength. And from this strength, he shapes a future that neither Simon nor Orgalorg could imagine. A future where identity is not shattered by power, but expanded by it. A future where exile becomes belonging and rebellion becomes authorship. The significance of this transformation reaches beyond Gunter himself. It suggests that the crown, though destructive, is not inherently a curse. It is a mirror, amplifying what lies within. For Simon, it amplified grief and obsession until they consumed him. For Orgalorg, it would have amplified hunger and ambition until nothing remained. But for Gunter, it amplifies acceptance, mischief, and a strange kind of loyalty. The result is something unexpected, not destruction, but creation. This shift also asks us to reconsider what power really is. For most of his life, Gunter's power was hidden, expressed only in small rebellions or sudden bursts of violence. But as Ice Thing, power becomes a steady presence, something that shapes his being rather than erupts from. He does not use it to devour worlds or bend others to his will. Instead, he uses it to define himself. In this, he shows that true power is not only about what we can take, but about what we can create from who we are. The bedtime lesson here is gentle but profound. Growth comes not from clinging to who we were, nor from trying to erase it, but from weaving it into something new. Gunter's transformation reminds us that we can be more than the sum of our mistakes, more than the weight of our falls. We can carry them forward, shaping them into a foundation for who we are becoming. In this way, even exile can blossom into destiny. It is also worth noticing how Gunter's future reflects the quiet theme of companionship. Though he rises as Ice Thing, he does not rise alone. He remains tied to the Ice King, not as servant, but as equal. This choice reveals that his creation is not only about self, but also about relationship. He could have claimed power for himself alone, but he does not abandon the bond that gave his exile meaning. Instead, he carries it forward, showing that even in transformation, loyalty remains. This loyalty reframes Gunter's future as more than personal triumph, becomes a kind of healing. Where Orgalorg once devoured, Gunter now chooses to stay. Where Simon was consumed by the crown, Gunter learns to live with it. In both cases, the cycle of destruction gives way to continuity. And in this continuity, we glimpse a softer kind of victory, one not measured in dominion or conquest, but in endurance and belonging. As we drift deeper into this reflection, the image of Gunter Crown takes on a dreamlike quality. He is still small, still waddling, still unmistakably himself, and yet in his eyes glows the light of creation. Not the creation of galaxies or empires, but the creation of identity, of selfhood, of a future shaped by acceptance. It is quieter than Orgalorg's hunger, gentler than Simon's madness, but in its quietness, it is stronger. As we bring Gunter's story to its close, we see how far he has come from the waddling silhouette first introduced in the snowy halls of the Ice Kingdom. What began as comedy became mystery, then tragedy, then rebellion, and finally creation. Gunter's journey shows us how identity can be layered, shifting, and paradoxical, yet still whole. He is a penguin and a god, a servant and a ruler, a companion and a creator. Each role lives within him, not as contradictions to be erased, but as truths to be carried. This is the essence of his transformation into Ice Thing. By embracing the crown and all that he has been, Gunter becomes the author of his own destiny. He does not erase Orgalorg, nor does he abandon the years he spent as a loyal companion. Instead, he weaves them together into something new, a future that honors his past without being trapped by it. This act of creation, quiet and understated though it may seem, is one of the most powerful in all of Adventure Time. And yet, even in this transformation, he does not step away from the bonds that shaped him. The Ice King remains by his side, and Gunter remains by his. Their companionship, strange and imperfect, continues. It is not erased by Gunter's new power, but instead redefined. No longer just master and servant, their bond evolves into something closer to partnership. It is as though Gunter, by becoming Ice Thing, finally balances the scales of their companionship, showing that fate and choice can meet in harmony. The future hinted at here is both mysterious and hopeful. We cannot know what Gunter will build as Ice Thing, nor what worlds his new identity may shape. But the tone of the story suggests that whatever lies ahead will not be conquest or destruction, but continuity. He has learned from exile, learned from rebellion, learned from companionship. He carries those lessons forward into his new destiny. And in doing so, he shows us that even the most broken or diminished beings can create something greater from their past. This makes Gunter's tale not only a story of power, but also of resilience. Cast down from the stars, trapped in feathers, misunderstood for ages, he could have surrendered to despair, but instead he transformed. He chose to weave his contradictions into authorship, to turn punishment into creation, to turn exile into belonging. In this he embodies the quiet strength of endurance, the kind of strength that does not roar but persists. For us, drifting into rest, Gunter's story becomes a lullaby of transformation. It reminds us that we, too, carry past selves, some broken, some comic, some tragic. And it reminds us that we, too, can choose how to carry them. We can resist them and fracture. We can deny them and collapse. Or we can weave them into something new, something truer, something that belongs only to us. So as the night grows deeper, let the final image settle in your mind. A penguin, once the terror of the stars, now crowned and glowing softly, waddles forward into a future of his own making. The ice around him glimmers, the crown hums faintly, and in his small, stubborn steps echoes the resilience of all creation. He is Gunter, he is Orgalorg, he is Ice Thing, and he is, above all else, himself. Good night.